We're all seeing what the Braves outfielders are doing in this World Series, including former Giants like Adam Duvall, and not just in the World Series, but in the postseason for the Atlanta Braves. And so on today's mailbag edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, one of the questions we're going to answer is, should the Giants pursue any of these Braves outfielders like Duvall, Jorge Soler, Eddie Rosario, Joc Pederson? And we have a ton of other questions to get to as well. How about Gabe Kapler entering the final year of his contract? Is he in line for an extension this offseason, and is that something we should expect? So we'll get into those questions and many more on today's Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants Baseball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, now including YouTube. And I also have a personal YouTube channel, Ben Kaspick, where I'm putting out bonus content. And so today we're going to do a mailbag here on Locked On Giants, and we're actually going to continue to answer your questions on my other channel. So if you want to listen to this show and get into all the questions and answers and then hear some more, check out my channel as well. But anyway, without any further delay, let's jump into the questions. First question coming from Malden, who asks, thoughts on the Giants going for one of the four Braves outfielders if they don't re-sign? Eddie Rosario and Jorge Soler are free agents. Adam Duvall and Joc Pederson have options. And so, yeah, that's a correct classification of the contract statuses of those players. Pederson and Duvall's options are mutual options, meaning the player and the team have to agree to it. Otherwise, the player is released into free agency. And I think that this is a really interesting question because on the one hand, those of us following the baseball postseason we've all seen these four Braves outfielders, all of whom were picked up in the middle of the season by the Braves. They have helped carry the team to the playoffs and through the playoffs. And here they are, one win away from the World Series title. But what's so interesting about this case, what is so interesting is that that Braves GM or president of baseball operations, Alex Anthopoulos, is getting so much credit, and in some ways deservedly so, for making these moves. And people are saying it was the greatest deadline ever. But at the same time, none of these players are players we should expect to be particularly impactful moving forward. Now, I think saying that is going to be a little bit controversial, especially in the case of Adam Duvall, who had 38 home runs and 113 runs batted in this season. But if you watch my show, which I've been doing, like I said, since 2015, I don't often talk about specifically RBI totals because that is a team stat. You've got to have guys on base to drive guys in, and it's not really context neutral. And so the fact is that Adam Duvall specifically this year alone he had a 281 on base percentage is what I'm trying to say, which is significantly below average. And his career on base percentage is 291. So while there is significant power in his bat and he's a really good defender, he's not the player that he gets painted out to be, in my opinion. I think he's a solid player. I like what I see from Adam Duvall. I think he could be a solid kind of contributor for a team, but I don't know that, a guy with a career 291 on base percentage really fits the mold of what the Giants are looking for. A big part of their model hitter is someone who gets on base a lot and has good strike zone discipline, and that's not Adam Duvall. Although I'm reminded of Kevin Pillar, who also was a guy who consistently struggled to get to a 300 on base percentage, and he was a difference maker for the Giants. But once again, he was a guy whose reputation was kind of greater than maybe what teams actually value him as. And so I'm going to point to the fact that Adam Duvall struggled to get a contract, or at least he wasn't signed for much, right? It was a 1-year, $5 million deal with the Marlins to start the season, with that mutual option for, I think, $7 million. So it's not, I don't know. I think that the reputation is greater than how he's valued within the industry. That being said, just like Kevin Pillar, I liked Kevin Pillar, I like Adam Duvall, but I'm just not sure they're the difference makers people paint them out to be. And Joc Pederson is a guy I wanted in the offseason for the Giants to sign and kind of maybe take that Alex Dickerson type of role as a platoon player. But let's just keep in mind, this year, Pederson was below average by weighted runs created plus, and he's not a good defender, nor is he a good base runner. And when we look at Jorge Soler, he rates as one of the poorest defenders in the game, and he was league average by weighted runs created plus. A couple years ago, he hit 48 home runs, which is kind of his best and only really good season that he's had. Eddie Rosario was a guy who was non-tendered by the Twins last offseason, ended up signing a 1-year, $8 million deal with the Indians, and then he was traded to the Braves in a salary dump deal that involved Pablo Sandoval. So that's kind of my explanation there. I'm not sure any of these guys are fits for the Giants, and it's truly amazing that they're having the success that they're having with the Atlanta Braves. Now, that's the thing about baseball, is you just never know who those difference makers are going to be, and it reminds me of 2012 Marco Scutaro, who, there was not a lot of attention given to that deal that the Giants made to acquire Scutaro, yet he went on to have the biggest impact of any player in that postseason by far. And so that's kind of how I see these Braves hitters. They are not the impact players necessarily. I mean, they can be. Every player has the potential to be an impact player. That's the thing. But for various reasons, Eddie Rosario, not a great defender, and had a below average offensive season, believe it or not. Overall, decent fits with Rosario and Pederson, but Soler being a bad defender and Duvall struggling to get over a 300 on base percentage. I just don't really see them as guys the Giants are going to go out and target. So that was a long answer, but I thought it was a question that warranted one. But anyway, coming up next, we have a lot more questions to get to, including the contract status of Gabe Kapler. How about the contract status of Farhan Zaidi as well? How a universal DH could impact the Giants in 2022 and beyond, and much more. So stay tuned for that. But first, we're back in better than ever, a new web interface for the start of the basketball season, and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one source for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, baseball, postseason, of course, that is very much running out of time here, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, here we go. We're going to get into more of your questions. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. And of course, check out my YouTube channel, Ben Kaspick, which I'll link below if you want to hear more questions and answers once we're done here for today. So the next question comes from Sonny Oliver, who asks, why haven't the Giants extended Gabe Kapler? Isn't his contract up next year? Never want a lame duck manager. Seems the Giants would be smart to try to extend Zaidi too while they're at it. And so I completely 100% agree with you. The one thing I'll say, though, is that I don't think this is something that they're just like blowing off, or that they're doing something wrong here, or that they should have extended him by now and what are they doing. I think it's 100% going to be a priority of the Giants over the offseason to extend their manager and their president of baseball operations probably at the same time. Clearly, both men are in line for an extension. And you're absolutely right about Kapler entering that lame duck season, meaning his contract is up at the end of the 2022 season, and you don't want him to go into that year without a contract for 2023 and beyond. And so Kapler, leading the Giants to a ridiculous 107 win season, which I still can't really wrap my mind around, 100% deserves that extension. This was not a popular hire at the time, but I think Kapler has won over a lot of people here in San Francisco with his behavior on and off the field, and just how he's led this team, the coaching staff he assembled that has rivaled any coaching staff in the major leagues in terms of getting the most out of their players. We just saw his top hitting coach, Donnie Ecker, get promoted to bench coach and offensive coordinator with the Texas Rangers, which, as I talked about yesterday, is a big blow to the Giants, but it also speaks really highly of Kapler's ability to have found Donnie Ecker and brought Donnie Ecker in the first place. And so, yeah, it doesn't get talked about a lot, but I 100% think that this is as much of a priority as anything for the Giants this offseason, and I would put money on that happening this winter. The one thing that complicates everything is a potential lockout, right? And the collective bargaining agreement expiring on December 1st at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. And so I don't know how that would potentially impact extensions for a manager and a president of baseball operations, but we're potentially looking at a freeze on roster moves. And so I don't think that would count, but at the same time, that's just something to look out for, and it could delay everything. But ultimately, I expect 100% an extension for Kapler, an extension for Zaidi, and I can see Larry Baer, Kapler, and Zaidi on the podium talking about how great they've been and announcing the extension. I just foresee that happening at some point. Anyway, Licinio, I'm so sorry, I'm totally butchering that name. I need my glasses, to be honest, asks, how is the universal DH going to change the Giants' offseason plans? Well, I'm not sure that it's going to necessarily, because they have historically, and by historically, I mean last season and 2021, they have had enough hitters on their bench to fill out the designated hitter spot on a given night. Like, for example, they always had one of Alex Dickerson or Austin Slater on the bench down the stretch here. And actually, as I'm looking at this, I really should be thinking about it in terms of Darren Ruff as an example, because when I'm looking at this, there's no Brandon Belt. But if Brandon Belt was, for example, in the lineup, I think Darren Ruff, and I actually talked about this the other night on KNBR, Darren Ruff would be that guy for me who could potentially be in line for more everyday plate appearances. Not to say that he has no place in the field. He is quietly a pretty decent to good defender in the outfield, and he is decent to good at first base as well, from what I have seen and from what some of the numbers have said. But they have guys on their team historically. That's the thing. Like, there are players who are reaching free agency right now, like Brandon Belt. And so if Brandon Belt doesn't come back, then it moves pieces around. But basically, I just see them stockpiling talent. I don't think they're going to go out and sign a player specifically to be a designated hitter. That, we in the National League don't get a lot of exposure to how teams use the DH on a day-to-day basis. We did see it in 2020. The DH was part of that 60-game season in the National League. And what we saw was that there's not really one specific guy who takes on that DH role. And that's actually been true in the American League as well. Teams just basically rotate guys through that spot, and it's kind of the exception rather than the rule to have one specific guy who is your DH. However, it's still possible if the Giants see a potential bargain situation and a good fit for like a Nelson Cruz, it's possible they could add that player. But at the end of the day, I would just expect them to bring in as many talented hitters as they can find, and the DH would just simply give them an extra spot to have guys in the lineup who would otherwise be on the bench. And I think it really bodes well for the Giants because they're as good as any team, as good as any team at getting the most out of every player on their roster and having value and talent at every spot on the roster. And so they've always got somebody on the bench who pretty much should be in a starting lineup. And so that's kind of a good situation for them. I think it worked well in 2020 for their offense, and I would expect that to continue in 2022. If there's a universal DH, that's like the big caveat, is that we don't know for sure that this is coming. It's just very likely to be a part of the new collective bargaining agreement, assuming one eventually gets done. So coming up next, we are going to get into more questions. There's a question about if the Giants are finally done having to overpay dramatically for hitters to come play for them, given the difficulties of their ballpark. But we've seen a transformation, and the Giants have become a good offensive team again. So how does that affect that issue? And we also have several other questions to get to as well. So all of that is coming up next. And we're going to get to those questions now. So the first question, as I said, is the idea. It comes from Mark, who says, do you think the idea of the Giants having to overpay hitters to lure them to the Bay are finally over with now that they led the league in home runs? So I don't think it's necessarily because they led the league in home runs, but I do think, and I'm saying this based on some things that Farhan Zaidi had to say specifically, I do think that the tide has absolutely turned in this regard. And the reason for it is that hitters and agents, free agent hitters and agents for free agent hitters and position players have taken notice of the fact that the Giants have helped their own players get so much better and helped free agents that they've brought in be the best versions of themselves. And so not only that, but like the team being good, it's just an attractive destination, probably still more so a little bit for pitchers, specifically pitchers looking for 1-year deals and then looking to hit the open market after that season, as we've seen from Kevin Gausman, Drew Pomeranz, Drew Smiley, Anthony DeSclafani, Alex Wood. It's just an incredible list of players that they've helped rebuild value. But on the offensive side, I mean, just look at all the great contributions they've gotten from pretty much everybody on their roster up and down. And so, yeah, I mean, the home runs had a big part in that, but Farhan Zaidi has specifically said that these days free agent players are asking about the infrastructure you have in place that's going to help them get better and be the best versions of themselves. And the Giants do that as well as any team. But once again, I want to reiterate that losing Donnie Ecker is a big blow. And Ecker was kind of considered to be the head honcho among the Giants' 3 hitting coaches. And to see him leave potentially impacts things. And so the Giants will have to sell. I don't know exactly what roles and who's considered to be the best among Justin Veely and Dustin Lind and Donnie Ecker. I don't know exactly how they broke apart or split up their duties. But presumably, Veely and Lind also can sell hitters on their ability to make those hitters the best versions of themselves. And the Giants will probably want to fill that spot that Ecker was taking with some other hitting coach. And so, anyway, I do think the Giants have a lot to offer because there are some teams out there, many teams actually, who still just employ a traditional hitting coach who doesn't really implement a lot of the technologies that the Giants put in place to help hitters get better. There's so much that the Giants are doing to help hitters get better. Look at Brandon Crawford changing his swing and just having an unreal career year at age like 35 and earning his way to a new 2-year, $32 million contract when it looked like the team was looking forward to his contract just being over so they could move on. But instead, he got so much better that he earned another $32 million from the Giants. And who knows what's to come after that even. So, yeah, it's not just Crawford. It's Posey, it's Ruff, it's Flores, it's Wade Jr., it's Yastrzemski. So, yeah, clearly players are going to want to play for the Giants because the Giants have things in place to help those players be the best versions of themselves. So the last question comes from Danny, who says, more likely to come back, Belt or Bryant? Who would you rather have? So this is a difficult question for me. In terms of who I think is more likely to come back, I think it has to be Brandon Belt because, I mean, first of all, they have the leverage of the qualifying offer, which they don't have with Bryant. And the qualifying offer is a 1-year, $18.4 million offer this winter. It's not always the same amount, but this year it's $18.4 million. And the Giants can offer that to Brandon Belt. And that kind of spurs negotiations. And it also is something that Belt could consider accepting, although I do think he could do better in free agency. But the other fact about it is that it hurts his free agency. So I'm not sitting here saying I'm happy about the fact that it hurts his free agency, but the effect of that is that it makes him more likely to return to the Giants because his value to other teams will be suppressed if they do extend him the qualifying offer. And the reason for that is that a team that signs a player who rejected the qualifying offer has to surrender a draft pick to the team that lost the player. So the Giants would get draft pick compensation from the team that signs Brandon Belt if he receives and rejects the qualifying offer. I know that's like a lot to say, but it's really not that complex, and it just makes a reunion more likely. And so I think there's no question that Belt is more likely to come back. There's the long history. Belt has been a Giant since his career began in 2011, and Bryant was just here for a couple of months. And the other thing is that Bryant is a big name star player who's going to have a lot of suitors. He's younger than Brandon Belt. He's 29. Brandon Belt is 33. So, yeah, there's just no question Belt is more likely of the two. And in terms of who would I rather have, this is putting me in a bit of hot water. But I'm going to say Brandon Belt. And that's probably a little bit controversial. But the reason for it, I've expressed this. I have concerns about Kris Bryant's defensive capabilities. I think we all saw that a little bit. I'm not sure it's really that big of a question. Like Bryant probably has a higher ceiling, but it's not entirely clear to me given how good offensively Brandon Belt has been since the start of the 2020 season. Brandon Belt has had a more difficult time staying healthy in his career, and it's tough. It's tough. Bryant is going to get a much bigger contract, and so that's part of it. And the Giants could sign Brandon Belt and then use the money that they don't spend on Kris Bryant signing somebody else. So I'm not saying, oh yeah, it's good to be cheap and save money. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying spend all the money, but I just think Belt represents a better buy, better bargain potentially. And if Bryant was a good defender at like third and in the outfield, then it would be a different story. But I just concerns as he's going to get a multi-year deal, probably 6+ years. And I have concerns about what the defense would look like. And then if you're telling me he's just going to be a first baseman or a DH down the road here, then that really, really hurts his value. And there's a case to be made that Belt is a better offensive player right now, and he plays a really good first base defense. So anyway, it's a sensitive subject. They're both good players. I'd like to see them both on the San Francisco Giants. That would be no problem at all with me. So anyway, that is all the time we have for today. I really hope you enjoyed this mailbag edition of Locked On Giants. We'll keep this going on my other YouTube channel, Ben Kaspick, which I'll link below, and we'll do more questions and answers there. Anyway, if you like this show, please consider rating it, leaving a review, telling your friends and family to check us out, and liking, commenting, subscribing on YouTube as well. So thank you in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.